My goal with this video is to sell you on Survival Hunters, because right now I see a lot of beta feedback where people are really upset with the direction that Survival Hunters have gone in. That you have all the wildfire bombs, that you're pulling your shotgun out of nowhere. They said it doesn't feel like a hunter, it doesn't feel very survival. They hate the fantasy, and while I understand that and I really wish that we get more glyphs to be able to change classes to the fantasy we want, I want to sell you on the idea that maybe this iteration of Survival Hunter isn't that far off the mark. Now, I know the first meme that's going around is all the people saying, well, it doesn't make sense because I'm throwing bombs, my pet's in melee and I'm in melee and you'd blow yourself up, and it's World of Warcraft. Come on, it's a little silly. If you've done any raiding in like 40-man raids, you've been standing in blizzards and demon fellfire storms and all that since the beginning, so I don't think the bombs are really that unrealistic to stand next to, considering I've been standing next to arcane mages, frost mages, and warlocks since the beginning. So let's talk about the Wildfire Bomb first. A lot of people feel that it doesn't represent hunters very well, that you're supposed to be using like traps and poisons, and you're not a goblin engineer, so why are you throwing bombs left and right? Also, what even is a Wildfire Bomb? I have done a lot of research to answer that question, and while there's not a definitive answer, I think I'm in a position where I can at least say I think it makes sense for a few different reasons. One, hunters and bombs actually have like a huge history. If you were here for vanilla WoW, which I know you can go back and play classic now, but if you were there back in the day, you know a ton of hunters went with engineering. One, because engineering was just one of the best professions to have, but also being able to weave dynamite into your rotation, especially since you have the melee dead zone, was super useful for hunters. Not to mention the other gadgets you got that were super helpful with Vain Death, like the goblin jumper cables. So we've actually been using like dynamite since the beginning. So incorporating that into the class fantasy I don't think is that far-fetched, since tons of hunters really used those dynamite sticks way back in the day. And then the wildfire aspect of it I think makes it have that hunter flair that really does give it a little bit of fantasy. So in Googling and researching and trying to figure out what exactly is a wildfire bomb, some people said that it was simply just the name wildfire, meaning like a fire that started in the wild because of a lightning strike, so maybe it's bottled lightning, but I wasn't satisfied with that. Instead, I think this actually goes back to a mob called Wildfire. And the reason why I think this is because I think hunters are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, but rather than making like a poison out of natural elements, we're basically milking the wildfire out of these fire elementals, these elemental lords. And why that's important is because you have to remember we're no longer random adventurers, right? We're the heroes of Azeroth. We're fighting the world-ending threats every expansion, and we're fighting void lords and the biggest threats possible. And that means that, you know, some spider venom or like some scorpion venom really isn't going to cut it when you're fighting cosmic horrors beyond our comprehension. But having something from the elemental lords or like the primal elements might be considered to do a little bit more damage than some scorpion venom. And that's where the shotgun comes in. I understand why people are frustrated with, well, you pull this random shotgun out of nowhere and it doesn't feel like my character, but let me sell you on it because I think it is an important tool for the survival hunter. When we look at ye old blunderbuss, we have to remember that they haven't always just fired pellets. A lot of the perks of the old blunderbusses is that they could fire anything, really. You shove something down the hole and you fire it out, whether it be rock, gravel, salt, sand, little shards of metal, whatever you could find, you could use. And in that context, that's very survival hunter, that you're using the ammunition that's naturally occurring around you. And there is a lot of that in WoW, right? We're often around very sharp things, very powerful things, very sharp fragments of things, and be able to just grab that and use that is actually really thematic for the survival hunter. But also, let's consider the context of, again, we're dealing with elemental lords, we're dealing with void lords, we're dealing with eldritch horrors, we're dealing with the strongest things across the multiverse or even death itself. So shotgun pellets won't necessarily cut it, you know? But a crafty survival hunter, well, they'd be able to have different shells for different situations, right? So if you were going into an area, say, with the Fae and they were weak to iron, you could stuff a bunch of shells full of iron against the Fae. If you were going up against vampires, you could shove it full of wood splinters to try and stake them. Now, these are more obviously real-world examples with myth and mythology, but the same principle applies to the World of Warcraft universe. If you're hunting some void thing that's weak to the light, you just get Ye Olde Paladin to bless some of your blunderbuss shots, and boom, you're firing light bullets that it's weak against. That's very Survival Hunter, especially again grabbing things off the ground and using them as your ability to hunt and fight in the moment prepared. And then they gave us the Flamefang Pitch potion, which is also very thematic for us. Going around and grabbing pitch and creating a volatile concoction that sets fire to the ground. Granted, it does sound very similar to the Wildfire Bombs, but I think it very thematically fits on, again, traps and bombs and getting into the thick of it and using your different environments to help you. Now again, the theme definitely does feel like if you're a goblin hunter or a gnome hunter, for example, you feel right at home. And I definitely understand the frustration of not everyone wants to be a goblin or gnome hunter, right? Sometimes you want to be a Tauren hunter or a troll hunter, and I think there's a good conversation we can have about having glyphs or class changes as a whole to make them more thematic to those particular races, and I do wish we would get that. Blizzard, you're already adding a new cash shop, so give us a new cash shop where we can buy skins for entire classes. That would be amazing, but what we have now isn't exactly as bad as everyone is saying. I actually really like this iteration of Survival Hunter. I like the idea of that we've been around since classic WoW and we've evolved from just being engineers like everyone else to having our own engineering for the class, specifically because it was so important to us and vital to us back in the old days. Like we've learned from our ancestor hunters before us. I like the idea of that we have this shotgun that we can load with different shells, so if we're preparing for a hunt, we can go hunt down the items that we know, okay, we're hunting this particular target, so we're going to need a lot of shells that have X, Y, and Z in them because it's weak towards it, or we've been out in the wild for weeks or months and we're running low on supplies, so I'm just filling this thing full up of gravel and shrapnel shards and the armor of my enemies because I'm in enemy territory, I'm low on supplies, and that's all I have left, so I am surviving with what I have. I love the thematic tones of having this flame pitch potion and be able to throw it down and encircle my enemies and fire so we're stuck in melee, since that's where we thrive, is in this melee combat, and now you can't leave because there's this ring of fire around you, and guess what? I've got a shotgun, you've got a sword. Who's gonna win that fight? And I know it's a little silly to just like walk up to a dragon and blast it in the face with a shotgun, but the Warcraft franchise has always been a little silly. I mean, look at our last trader post, right? We got a bunch of food-based items, and now we have Pandaren chefs running around with a rack of ribs and a cooking pot smacking things down. Is it any more ridiculous to have that Pandaren with a rack of ribs beat a dragon down with a rack of ribs or an ear of corn than it is for a hunter to pull out a shotgun and blast it in the face? Like, I think we need to embrace the silliness a little bit. But there's my rant. I hope that at least I can make you see the light a little bit on Survival Hunters. Again, I love this iteration of Survival Hunter, and I want them to keep expanding on it. I get that if it's not your thing, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone's saying, or it's that off tone to what Survival Hunters could and should be. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.